Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation and discussion around one of the, if not the most exciting project we have at the Tisch Center at the School of Professional Studies, which is being built actually right next to my door here in the office on 7 East 12th Street. It's very exciting. The Hospitality Innovation Hub is going to make a significant difference to our students, certainly to our faculty, but also to our alumni community within the school, but also across the university. I am Nicolas Graf. I'm the Associate Dean of the Tisch Center, and it is my pleasure to be joined by one of our full-time faculty member, Dr. Vanja Bogicevic, who joined us a little over a year ago, and we decided to hire her because she had the perfect skill sets to help us run the Innovation Hub, and she will be introducing herself in a few minutes. I'm also very happy and delighted to have one of our alum, Jonathan Kim, who graduated a little over 10 years ago from the program, and he's the founder and managing partner of Redback Pacific, and Jonathan has a very distinguished career. He's served as a young trustee at the university, and he's currently investing in different businesses, from startups to tested and more experienced businesses. And he's going to join us a little later in the discussion about why the Innovation Hub is going to be so important for the Tisch Center, for the industry, and for our students. So the hospitality and travel industry is a very large industry. It is made of very different sectors, from traditional hotels to restaurants, to cruise lines, airlines, and many, many others. In fact, the way we look at this industry at the Tisch Center and at NYU is through the lenses of the traveler. And we look at what we call the travel wheel, which is made of different phases that people take when thinking, booking, and actually travel. So it all starts with the dream phase. You dream about going places, then you plan your trip, then you compare different alternatives, then you actually book, then you travel, then you stay and experience your travel product and services, and then you share your stories, you share your pictures, you share with your friends, you share on social media. And that wheel of travel has been transforming rapidly pre-COVID. There were many, many trends, amongst which digitalization of the entire experience, augmenting the experience using technology. All of these were major trends pre-COVID. And what COVID has done to this industry, in addition to putting it to a full stop in March, but the industry is starting to recover, almost fully recovered in China, and is recovering around the world. But what COVID has done, it has accelerated the main trends that are fostering innovation within hospitality and travel. And so pre-COVID, we realized that this industry was ripe for more disruption, more innovation, mostly fueled by technology and design. And so we decided to align our curriculums, both for our traditional undergraduate program, but also our 3 graduate programs. And all of our curriculums now are very much emphasizing entrepreneurship and innovation, trying to help and support our students to think more creatively about the business, and trying to solve some of the pain points that still exists within the traveler's journey, whether it's going through airports faster, safer, whether it's checking in a hotel without using any kind of touch or without touchless technology, going to restaurants and ensuring that the experience is both safe and enjoyable, or whether it's booking a hotel or travel product in a more seamless way. So we've built our curriculums around entrepreneurship, innovation, and the Innovation Hub will be the physical place or the ecosystem that we're putting together to help our students both learn more creatively, but then also innovate and start up new businesses. And to do that, we're currently, as I said earlier today, and I apologize in advance if you hear some construction noise next to me, but we're building the Innovation Hub as we speak. And the Innovation Hub will really be made of 3 different spaces and 3 different uses. One space being built is the experiential classroom or experiential learning lab, which is a classroom that is enhanced by many different technologies that will help students learn firsthand and experiment with the current best practices in our sectors, whether it's a revenue management system, whether it's a production process for a kitchen, whether it's a scheduling system. The students will be able to experiment these best practices and master them. So it's all about exploring and mastering the present. The second space is a startup space, which will be, we'll offer to students different startup programs. One is an incubator program for early stage startups, and another one is an accelerator program, which will be open to any student or alumni from the NYU community and faculty and staff members as well. The incubator will help early stage startups and late stage startups to develop their products, develop their solutions, prototype it, and then try to get some monetary grants and prizes to support their businesses. It will also allow them to work with our students, hire them as interns or hire them as amongst the first employees, and work in our space in the third space of the hub, which is the co-innovating community, which was designed pre-COVID to be a co-working space, essentially. We're going to have to rethink that depending on how long we have to continue and maintain social distancing. But these 3 spaces will work hand in hand. In the startup space, and I'm going to show you in the next slide the physical making of what's happening here on our floor. So we have 3 spaces. We have one, as I said, on the right-hand side, you have the experiential learning classroom or experiential learning lab, which is very flexible in the way it can be designed, if you want, the way you can move all of the furniture. It is fully Zoom ready, has different smart boards, has different technologies that can help you experiment all of the current best practices, as I said before. Then between that space and the third space, there is the prototyping space, and that is where we would have an artificial intelligence and virtual reality lab. And I will have my colleague Vanja talk more about that in a few minutes. But that space essentially will help anyone with a creative idea to design it, prototype it rapidly and cost effectively. And that should support the startups we will be working with. And then the third space is that co-working space, which some people will see will look like a student lounge, except a lot more cool than the current student lounge we have on campus. If we go to the next slide, you'll see some look and feel, and this is a rendering of which actually it's much smaller than the reality, but the rendering of the space between the prototyping space and the experiential learning lab. And then the next slide shows the kind of look and feel of the furniture we'll be using. So there will be a lot of colors. There will be some movable furniture, relatively modern. There will be we will bring in some plants and greens. There will be some clouds on the ceilings. So that should be a fairly cool space. For any one of you who's interested in following up after this webinar series, I really encourage you to, for the alumni that are here, to join the Violet Network, because we will be posting more news on that network whenever they come. And to give you a taste of what kind of news we'll be showing, this is a picture, and you may not see it extremely well, but this is a picture of the current status of construction right next to my office. I know that Vanja said you may need a lot of imagination to really figure it out, but that's how it currently looks right now. So now I'm going to hand it over to Vanja, who's going to talk a little more about the use of virtual reality in designing new and innovative solutions in the hospitality and travel space. So Vanja, please, would you first introduce yourself a little more than I did?
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for the introduction and for the wonderful overview of the Hospitality Innovation Hub. So I would like to share a bit more about myself and the reason why I actually joined the Tisch Center. I'm a trained architect, so that used to be my previous vocation before I transitioned to education, hospitality, marketing research. I worked as an architect in 3D visualization studios where I designed and visualized hospitality programs such as hotels, casinos, restaurants. And at one point in my career, I think I wanted something more. And I was very interested in the way how people perceive the space and also the innovations that we can introduce in technology domain that are going to help consumers better visualize a space, because as Nicolas mentioned, not everybody has equal imaginary abilities. So sometimes it's very difficult to think about how the space is going to look like once it's being built. I used to work at the Ohio State University prior to joining the Tisch Center, where I ran the virtual reality lab. So as an architect previously and as again a researcher, I really have been closely following the development of the commercial virtual reality, and I was very eager to see how VR can be applied in hospitality to enable guests to see the premises of hotel properties and other hospitality tourism venues before visiting them, as well as to use virtual reality to kind of pitch the concepts to the investors. So because to me, VR really seemed like this really cool immersive marketing tool. And this really was, I mean, back in 2012 when the first Kickstarter campaign was launched for Oculus Rift. So some creative concepts and startups are really based on this new technology, such as VR, and the others are simply using VR for marketing purposes. And I just realized, from the research standpoint, let me test this and see how people respond and react to VR. So in my research on virtual reality, I really wanted to investigate how people respond to 3D environment of a newly imagined hotel, specifically hotel suite within that hotel, that can be displayed to one group of people using simply 3D renderings, such as that rendering similar to that rendering that Nicolas has showed for our High Hub. And also to kind of see, we can show that space using the existing technologies of 360 degrees web-based tours, similar to, again, like Google Street Maps, and then to kind of advance towards like more immersive technologies such as virtual reality. So for this project that I completed previously in my previous virtual reality lab, I partnered with VR and kind of prop tech development studio Case 3D. They're specialized in real estate visualizations, and they developed a prototype of this new hotel in virtual reality as a part of the entire kind of prop tech package for the developer. So let us first see the video of that development of what the user who is exploring the space in virtual reality sees. So because I'm not able to show you the actual VR, introduce you to the actual VR, I'm just going to show you this video recording. So essentially the guest who's thinking about maybe visiting a hotel property or an investor who wants to kind of test drive, the building, they can enter the facilities, they can interact with the objects. And I really like this part. Almost everybody does this, trying to sip from a cup. And they can, in this case, really test drive how their virtual experience could look like while they are imagining how it's going to be to walk in that hotel or stay in that hotel room. So what I have found out after kind of completing the study and comparing people's responses, what I found out is that this research showed that virtual reality really allows people to develop these brand experiences with a brand that have never visited before. So even though they've never heard of the hotel brand, they've never stayed at the hotel brand, this VR kind of was able to elevate their brand experience. And also it kind of developed this phenomenon called pre-purchase daydreaming, where basically guests are imagining themselves and teleporting themselves into this virtual world of the brand that is being displayed in VR. With that as a consequence, their intention to visit the hotel or visit the destination in the future becomes kind of stronger and grows stronger. So we kind of saw that virtual reality can be used in this case for prototyping guest room experience. But there are other exciting opportunities, innovations in the industry where VR is applied. So for example, here we can see that virtual reality can actually be the essence of a new tourism activity, a new idea, because it can simulate adventure tourism activities such as skydiving in this case. And thinking about the increasing demand to increase accessibility of tourism sites, using skydiving, virtual skydiving can really increase the accessibility of skydiving to people who might have faint hearts or might have some medical conditions that would actually prevent them to try and do the activity kind of in real life and do the real thing. And maybe VR in this case can help them overcome that anxiety. So this is a really interesting application, innovative concept. Actually, one of these iFly centers is located here in New York in Westchester. Next, this is really one of my favorite applications, and it happened relatively recently as a consequence of COVID. So John Legend, everybody knows who John Legend is. He held a 17-minute long concert to kind of promote his charity organization and also to promote his new album in Wave platform, which is one of the online VR music platforms where attendees were able to look at John Legend's avatar, interact with that avatar, ask them questions, and John Legend was on the other side chatting with them between the songs, also collecting donations. And that was all accessible through virtual reality. So essentially, we use VR now in this post-COVID world to create and completely run VR concerts. It may also be possible soon to complete the entire travel booking process in virtual reality. Since 2017, Amadeus, GDS, they had been experimenting and building demos for kind of a platform that is going to allow travelers to completely do their travel booking process in VR. So they can spin the globe to choose a destination. They can visit that destination, search for flights, even enter the aircraft virtually and select their preferred seats. They can try and test different rental cars, even pay for their entire trip, all that in VR. And finally, virtual reality is a way to protect heritage sites from overvisitation. Even though right now majority of sites are suffering and there we have kind of switched from overvisitation to undervisitation, the conservation issues are still present. So instead of having numbers of people visiting the destinations that could be endangered or that are suffering devastation, you could actually have them visit that space in VR and then decide whether they want to visit the actual space, in the future. So, for instance, this is an example of a 5,000-year-old tomb in Egypt, and this project was developed in collaboration between Egyptian conservationists and Harvard University. So why not have something like that in our Hospitality Innovation Hub? If we're imagining where VR can be applied next, that is really for our students to discover in the High Hub, where they will have the access to education, experiential learning, training, resources, and connections to brainstorm their startup ideas, develop concepts, and some of them could use these virtual environments to simulate services and prototype physical spaces, while others can really focus on new, creative, and innovative services that may utilize VR, such as, for instance, developing platforms for virtual events. So with this, I would like to hand it over to Jonathan. Jonathan, we are very happy to have you with us. If you could please introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. Thank you for having me. I graduated from the Tisch Center 2009 with hospitality major. I run Red Badge Pacific. We're an alternative asset management firm with offices in New York, Korea, Singapore. We invest in VCPE, so early stage startups and later stage companies. But I think on the topic of VR, I travel monthly to between Asia and US, and now obviously because of COVID, we can't. So just simple things like using Zoom to other ways that we're investing. So I think it's quite a hot topic, and we'd love to talk further, and especially about the hub and what it means to students and alumni.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Vanja. I think, Vanja, you made a great presentation on the use of VR and how it's connected with the hub. Jonathan, so how would you have used the lab or the hub when you were students? Had the lab been there while you were students? What would you have been excited about it? How would you have perceived it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, even beyond what the lab will be used for, right, is having a space for hotel and tourism, so Tisch Center students. Obviously, when I was in school, it was on 4th Street, right? This was before the new building, the SPS building. So I think the SPS building, having used it a lot since graduating, is a huge difference from when I was in school. And then having a space just for Tisch Center hospitality tourism students, I think is a whole nother level of engagement. So I think that starting point is a huge difference, and it's a huge value add to current students. But even alumni who, as mentors, meeting their mentees in that space. And then when, you had showed me the plans when it first came out, but really how open it was, and the fact that the students would be next to faculty, because obviously they're in the middle. The students would be in the middle. It brings that engagement, makes it much more intimate than what it could have been without having that space. So I think first and foremost, it's completely different and a huge value add. Secondly, what the space would be used for, obviously, I think when I was, I graduated in 09, so 05 to 09, there was no virtual space. I don't think there was many options on campus as well, because this was obviously not ready at that time for anything virtual. But having that space, I think, would, definitely give the students an edge, and also experience to things that they wouldn't otherwise have, but are dealing with now, because obviously all the hotel companies are figuring out how to go virtual, especially now pushed up with COVID. So it's a huge benefit in many different ways to the students compared to when I was there.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I don't think the trends about thinking about the virtual experience in hospitality and travel. That trend existed before. I think COVID all of a sudden just accelerated it in many different ways. And we had a question in the chat who was COVID has impacted the hospitality industry. Any thoughts going forward? I think first of all, I think the recovery will be very uneven depending on the geographic location. As I said, some countries were doing quite well. Take Europe. Europe was doing fairly well over the summer, and people went on vacation, and so the hospitality and travel industry did quite well over the summer there, but now they seem to be going back into a very hard lockdown. So again, overnight, you basically shut down tourism. You go from over tourism to under tourism, or no tourism for that matter. I think, so the recovery phase is one thing. I think during the recovery phase, people are just trying to figure out how to maintain some level of activity, leveraging virtual technologies, whether it's a simple Zoom or like, the John Legend example, which I think is brilliant, using virtual events to still host a concert. And so I think we had a fireside chat two weeks ago or something with a company called Invent, who is an event management company that is very strong on the physical and virtual application of events, or putting virtual and physical events together. And so they were talking about the movement in the event space towards some kind of blended mode, very much like the instruction we're giving this semester at NYU. It's some blended, which is partially physical and partially digital. But medium term, I think the industry is going to continue. I mean, it's an industry that has been growing for decades and decades and decades, and I don't think people's eagerness to travel and experience new places is going away anytime soon. I think there's a period where it stopped. There's a period where it's a slow recovery, but I think in 2 or 3 years it will be back to where it was in 2019 and grow at the annual rate of 4.5% globally, which is what it had been in the decade pre-COVID. What's going to change, though, is, as Vanja said, there will be some innovative ideas, such as skydiving virtually, and trust me, that would be very good for me. Even when I look from the window here, we're on the 7th floor, and I'm scared. So maybe I would do it virtually. I think there are a lot of things. We've seen some virtual museum visits that help you prepare before you actually go and visit the museum. So it gives you tons more of information on the different things you can be interested in. And then when you go to the museum, then you can actually, think back at what you saw in the virtual visits. And so there will be a lot more virtual pre-visits, just like in the virtual booking phase. I want to pre-visit before I actually book and make a choice. That's all in that comparison and booking phase. Jonathan, how do you see that? I mean, you're investing in different companies. Some are more innovative than others. What do you see right now?
So I guess I'm in Korea at the moment, and so one of the few countries where I think travel hasn't stopped. I mean, Jeju Island, which is a resort destination, it's 40 minutes by flight. It's having the best numbers it's ever seen for tourism. The hotels are full. They're all about 2x the price pre-COVID because Koreans can't travel anywhere else. And so when I just take Korea, for example, obviously, at the start of it or at the height of it here, there was no travel because of restrictions. The minute those restrictions were released, everybody went traveling. So I think that'll be, definitely the trend that other countries follow. But I think, myself as a consumer and traveler, you're going to pick and choose where you go, and you'll spend your money much more wisely because you've had all this time to research and figure out where you're going to go, where you're going to stay, what you're going to do. And so the companies and destinations that figure that out virtually and give them experience, I think have a huge advantage. In terms of how we're investing, it makes it much more difficult because we can't travel within Southeast Asia like we did every month. So everything is virtual. But in the hospitality space specifically, there is a budget Southeast Asia branded company that we invested in. They went digital pre-COVID because of their business model, and they're anchored by Yeonolja, the largest hotel company in Korea, which has gone digital. So they went keyless. They did the room service by robot delivery about a year ago. So I think they've benefited hugely because they've got rid of the whole touch points that most hotel companies are going towards. And so, I mean, I think Corona has pushed everything up, maybe a decade or maybe even more, especially how we use Zoom. And this, for example, doing Alumni Weekend virtually. But it's a huge difference between the companies that have figured it out and have spent the money ahead of time, and then the companies that are just figuring out. Because obviously, even if you have a budget, doesn't mean that it would be seamless by far. And I just look at our partner Jan Olja and how they've done here. They've invested heavily, call it 2-3 years ago, and now they've been ready. And so I think there's going to be a huge difference going forward in who recovers quickly and who doesn't.
Vanja, you're the most expert in this panel on virtual reality, and so what do you think is the next frontier? Because you kind of looked at the different types of virtual reality, the different uses of it. What do you think is the next frontier in there, and how would that potentially benefit our industry?
So one thing that I've been noticing in the past few years is that since, again, like this is something that is very common with every new technology that shows up, and it goes through that Gartner's hype cycle. It peaks with this inflated expectations, then there is this thorough disillusionment, and at this point, we kind of have more realistic expectations of what the technology can do for us and where it can go further. So in this year, again, like kind of COVID has sped up the development in virtual reality, essentially because you can use it to alleviate the hostility that could exist right now in the outdoor spaces and actually indoor spaces outside of the comfort of everybody's home. One thing where I feel the VR is going to go further is we're still waiting for the technology to be a bit more elegant. So it used to be the case. So back when I did this study, and this was actually done 2 years ago, I was using an HTC Vive headset to showcase VR to the study participants. And that equipment is bulky. It's not really elegant to connect it. You still need expensive hardware to run VR, and there were glitches. Companies are working on development of more elegant solutions that contain everything within a single headset, such as Oculus Quest, and Oculus, I think Quest is going to have the second version coming out now. So those are some things where we can see the VR going. First, the hardware is going to have to be improved, and then we will have better opportunities. Now, along with VR, we have to think about the gaming world, and the gaming industry is changing and open up doors for a lot of innovations now. I don't know how many of you are playing, or maybe your children are playing this video game called Fortnite. They really are the innovators in the space. They were the first ones to introduce the concept of virtual events. So once we have VR to become kind of a very common technology that is kind of ruling the gaming world, I think that's where we will have more application in the hospitality industry. So it may be from completely building the real estate space in VR. I can relate, and I forgot about the exact VR platform, but read an article in BBC back in the day that people were purchasing land in virtual reality in this platform because they thought it's gonna be worth something one day. So, I mean, those are just some of the possibilities that can happen. Now, whether it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that those opportunities are endless. And we are seeing a lot more, I think, uses of VR also in this bridge between wellness, healthcare, and hospitality, where we can really use it to reduce the stress. I know that a lot of people have been suffering now during this time of COVID, and some of them might have used VR to escape their everyday reality, their four walls, and to be able to kind of improve their health and well-being. So that's where I kind of see the most immediate application.
Thank you. I just want to remind the audience, feel free to ask questions in the chat box or wherever you can. Happy to answer any of these. Jonathan, so you were talking about, alumni potentially coming back here and being mentors to students. One of the things, so the way we want to connect the curriculum with entrepreneurship and innovation is by, having students use the actual technology that are currently used in the business, be able to, understand them, evaluate them, and then figure out, the pain points that remain in our industry and what these current best practices or best solutions are not solving, the problem they're not solving. And we hope that in doing so, some of our students will say, hey, you know what, I have an idea on how to fix that. And so they will come into our incubation program. And our 2 graduate programs now that we've changed the curriculum entirely. They've been state approved 2 weeks ago. We'll introduce them very shortly. They are 2 entrepreneurship concentrations, which will help, for credit if you want, but will help students build their businesses. How do you see alumni, coming into play? I mean, would you see like alumni potentially becoming board members or advisors, and how would you see that for yourself?
Yeah, no, I think I mentioned this earlier. I think just having the space is a huge benefit, and I think it's it's a different type of value add that the alumni can give the students, but also take from the center, to be able to have a space to be able to meet the students, and obviously, alums of the Tisch Center want to be around Tisch Center students and faculty when you spend the little time you do back on campus. I think that just having a physical space is huge. And then secondly, the interaction between the students and alumni / mentors is huge, because a lot of alumni now, I'm sure, in the industries they're working, whether in hospitality or not, it is much more entrepreneurial than it was, say, a decade ago. And then if you compare 2 decades ago. And so being able to see what's out there technology-wise from the students, and it's not that, we're going to go take a full grad course and or, go take change careers, but to be able to see the different technology, especially if you're still in the hospitality space, I think is huge, and no better way to do that than to do that through the students. And then on the students' perspective is that, gives, whether you want to go into this field or not, it gives you just a more entrepreneurial spirit, and to be able to try that and test that while you're in school, when there's no risk at all. And this doesn't have to be a career path fully, I think is huge. And then, having the space to connect alumni and students gives more incentive and more of a touch point to alumni to want to stay involved, because I think the center, Dean, obviously you and all the other, everyone else's efforts to make it happen is huge. And obviously it costs money to create a space like that. So the more involved the alumni get, the more opportunities, there'll be both for alumni and for new incoming students, which would then push the Tisch Center forward. So I think for everybody, I mean, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and it's long overdue, and it's great that it's happening, and no better time than now, when, when we spoke kind of pre-COVID, this is much more of a priority for students and alumni now than it was pre-COVID, I would imagine.
Yeah, and Sonal reminded us that the alumni, SPS Alumni Relations is partnering with the SPS Wasserman Center to develop that mentoring program on the SPS Violet network that will allow all of the alumni to connect with students and mentor them in their career choices, but also possibly mentor them. And we certainly will look into creating some kind of a mentoring program that is specific to the early stage startup program we're putting together. But there's a second program that we're putting together, which is an accelerator program, later stage startups, typically C-series type of startups. They've already raised capital, and they've already have some kind of a product and a consumer base, but they need to accelerate or die, pretty much. That's what the accelerator programs are. And this program will be open to any alumni and any faculty member or any staff member of NYU. It will be open. We may open it also to people outside of NYU on a competitive basis, and there will be support, there will be grants, and there certainly will be some connections and discussions between the early stage startups and the later stage startups. And I guess the early stage will learn a lot about the what initial mistakes you do when you work on a new venture. What are the things you should have avoided? What are the things you should have focused on more? And all of this kind of learning, I think that's going to be a good way of working. But it's also an opportunity. The hub is an opportunity to also strengthen collaboration of the Tisch Center, between the Tisch Center and other divisions or centers and institutes within the school, but also across the university. And one example is a new course that we're putting together for the spring semester. And Vanja, maybe you want to talk about it.
Sure. So we're developing a new course together with the Division of Programs in Business, specifically their MS in Management and Systems program, which is called, the course is called Augmented and Virtual Reality Enabled User Experience Design. So this course is really about teaching students design thinking principles from the ideation, concept development, prototype building, and kind of with the application of virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, whether some students will choose to possibly review the existing AR and VR applications and maybe apply their concepts in that realm, or they will simply use VR or AR to prototype their new services. This is, again, something that we will explore in the course. And essentially, this course would kind of bring together hospitality students who have the knowledge of the industry changes, trends, and needs, and the students who are proficient in software development, in visualization. So we would have these kind of multidisciplinary teams that can work together to come up with different concepts. And this is kind of the purpose of the course. So this is just the beginning. We are hoping that more opportunities will arise and that possibly we'll be able to integrate other programs within the SPS and possibly wider NYU and similar course offerings.
Well, entrepreneurship is one of the main area of focus of the university anyway, and a number of other entrepreneurship labs and things of the sort. And we certainly look forward, collaborating with them, certainly. But it's true, I think, the intersection of, real estate, for instance, we have the Shack Institute, and what's the future of destinations, that's hospitality and travel. So there are some overlaps, and being able to potentially fast prototype some of the ideas that come out in a cross-listed course certainly would be very helpful. We have a question here, which is about innovation and VR impact on consumer from a price perspective. And the question is it safe to assume that hotel investment in tech and VR should drive up the average room rate? And then there's another question, I think, which is living in a COVID world where folks have been impacted financially. I'm curious to know about the financial impact to consumer regarding hotel stays. So I guess there's one question. It's one question, but maybe there are two angles to take to respond to that. So Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think, it's definite that the cost, it's a huge cost, and especially, I think it was touched on earlier, it's still in its very premature stages, right? VR is expensive, all technology expensive because it's not widely available, and everyone uses different tablets, PCs, and mobile phones. So I think there's no question. I think, how the hotel companies go about it is going to be the differentiator. There's a resort here in Korea I recently stayed at that, for room upgrades, they would show you the room virtually. And now I don't know what the hit rate or the success rate is, but I imagine if you're trying to upsell, if someone's able to see the room that's bigger and they're more willing to pay a higher price before checking in, and it's tailored, because if you list and they know the type of customer and what you prefer, then that's a way that where it's not getting, that cost is not going across everybody who stays there. So I think, people, the hotel companies who are innovative and figure out that they're not just charging, say, a 5-10% premium because they have all the rooms virtually available online, because the average room, you don't really need to see it virtually because it's an average hotel room. But I think, this cost is, from our related investments into hotels, it's a cost that just has to be made because, there's more and more hotel brands coming up today. There's not many leaving the system, and there's not many hotels physically leaving the system. So it's just becoming much more competitive. So if you don't stay competitive, then folks are just not going to reach you, right? And so it's a cost, no question, and it will be. Will it necessarily be pushed to the consumer? Somehow, at some point it does, of course, just like all franchise fees, but it's how they do it. I think that is the big question, and who, figures it out so that the consumer feels that it's worth it. Because if you are wanting an upgrade and you're able to see the room ahead of time, because I use our partner here in Korea. They do hourly check-ins. You could pick, eventually what time you'll check in, when your room's ready. It's all keyless. And so would a consumer pay more for that? An average business traveler would, because it matches their schedule. And so I think, yes, it really will come down to the winners and how they figure out the cost. But yes, it will be a big cost, I'm sure.
It's an interesting point. And we had a lecture series Tuesday evening, the Grosinger Bergman Distinguished Lecture Series. And the talk was about the future of travel and whether travel would restart or reset. In other words, would just restart as before or would reimagine itself. And the question touched on innovation and sustainability, and how do we move away from the negative impact of travel and tourism when it comes to over-tourism, especially that some of the local communities do not necessarily benefit from the economic gains from travel and tourism. And we had two very good speakers, one from JetBlue and another one from G Adventure. And one of the things that came out was in destinations and hospitality and travel product and services need to be decommoditized. There has been a trend of commoditization driven in part by the consolidation of the industry and the decade-long growth. So you didn't necessarily have to differentiate yourself so much because the market was simply growing, so you didn't have to fight for market share. And I think your point about, there's a lot of competition now. Demand is depressed. Supply still is there. I mean, we expect some of the supply to be, probably converted into something else when it comes to hotels and even alternative lodging properties. But that being said, I think it's an opportunity to decommoditize the industry and the entire hospitality and travel experience. And I think VR in many ways could do that. And to the question, yes, if you decommoditize something, prices tend to go up because people see more value in something they perceive as being more unique. And as a consequence, businesses are able to capture more of that value that's been created. So I do believe, but again, is it normal to be able to take a flight, New York to Texas for $29? Is it normal? And we know that, from a revenue management perspective, sometimes it made sense because the fixed cost component is something, but the variable cost is almost zero when you take another passenger on an aircraft, and so the 29 are almost all contribution margin to your fixed cost. So, but again, that being said, it's probably not normal from an environmental impact standpoint. And so maybe that trend towards less commoditization in the industry is a good trend, and yes, consumers may have to pay a little more. We have another question, which is probably the toughest question I'm being asked on a regular basis, is how can we support graduating students given the state of the industry? So I'm going to ask you, Jonathan, again, what advice would you give to graduating students, whether it's a young graduate now or someone who's about to graduate fairly soon? And I know it's a tough question. I'll give my personal advice after yours so that I can pick your brain first.
No, I think, and I've touched this, and I think this is why the lab plus VR is super critical, because it's just being entrepreneurial. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and be a startup founder. It doesn't mean that you have to go start a hotel tech company. But we're faced this now as an industry with COVID, is that if you don't, jump on the wagon of technology and VR, hotel companies will suffer, because we just talked about the commoditization of it. So as graduating students, it's obviously, this is a very tough time now, folks who just graduated or are graduating. So it's really, when I say entrepreneurial, it's being innovative and figuring out how to get the coffee chat virtually, because now you can't meet in person, how to somehow get a shadowing or internship, and then figuring out how to land the job, and really understanding the landscape, because it is so wide in the job opportunity. So figuring out which companies would hire now is important. So I think having that entrepreneurial spirit, which I think this lab will push, is just to think outside the box, is super critical. Obviously, everything else in terms of grades, internships, recommendation letters, from things that were just as important when I graduated is all the same. Nothing's gotten easier, but I think the entrepreneurial, being more innovative, and especially in a time like now, figuring out how to do everything virtually, and staying active, which is, I think, being very consistent in the job hunt for folks graduating, because it is a full-time job finding a job, and continue to do that even now during COVID, because folks are able to do coffee chats much more easily for 30 minutes on Zoom calls, whereas before it was much harder for them to come down from their office and meet at the local coffee shop. So I think it's just being very consistent, but trying to be as innovative as possible within the guidelines of where they're trying to go for a job.
Thanks, Vanya. Our faculty are advising students on a regular basis. What are your typical advice? Because you've probably been asked the question.
Oh yes, I have been asked that question probably back in May, when a lot of our students were looking for summer internships, and when they were disappointed that some of the job opportunities they have been promised have diminished in the meantime. So I always kind of, you're going to naturally have to compare this to the job market that was, again, the post-2008 world, and explain to students that it's not the end of the world. The industry is going to recover, but perhaps their initial internships and the employment are not going to be the ones where they imagine themselves being from start. So essentially, I always tell them that they should not think of it as a failure that they were not able to land their dream internship, but really try to use the best they can from the opportunities that were given. Right now, we are teaching them new skills, and in this Hospitality Innovation Hub, we will teach them some new skills that may take them briefly to another industry that is practicing some of the principles from hospitality, and then they may come back later. Or we can just equip them to become entrepreneurs and come up with very creative, innovative solutions that will not require them to be hired in like somebody else. At the same time, I feel that we really need to prepare the students to just transition with, I guess, maybe a bit less enthusiasm into the internships they're given. Take an unpaid internship. And maybe that's going to be something that is going to open up the door to other opportunities. That's usually my advice that I was giving to students at the moment. And as John has mentioned, there are a lot of, again, creative ways that can come up with joining, maybe, again, like having those virtual chats, meeting people in these virtual meetings, conferences, webinars. Those are the things that can open up new opportunities as well, elevating your profile on social media, being more active and engaging. So those are just like some of my thoughts and some of my advice that I give to students.
I think you're both very good advisors when it comes to I think in terms of your entrepreneurial mindset that you refer to, both of you in different ways. I remember myself, when I was a kid, my dream was to be a chef and to own a restaurant. So I was trained as a chef. And then all of a sudden, I ended up wanting to work in marketing. And so I went for an MBA. And after I wanted to be in marketing, then I ended up doing a PhD in finance. And I never thought I would find myself here as a dean at NYU. And really, the lesson I had is whenever I met people and opportunities were presented to me, I always had to make a decision. And do I want to pursue the opportunity or not? And I decided more often than not to pursue the opportunity that took me in a very different direction than I originally thought. But I think people need to be open-minded about what it is that they're going to do in the next years. I mean, I certainly don't know what the industry is going to look like in 10 years from now. And I don't think anybody really knows. Things are changing so rapidly. So why would someone really want to develop a 25-year career plan when the world's changing so quickly? So that entrepreneurial mindset is the ability to first be resilient, be open-minded, understand that opportunities present themselves, and understand that they come, and understand that you have to make a decision about it. Nothing is pre-written, and so you have to be able to rapidly change gears. That's one. And finally, what I want to say, we had an advisory board meeting earlier this week, and we had some very good positive signs coming from the consulting businesses, the ones that are doing valuations of hotels and the one doing asset management or asset restructuring or debt restructuring and litigations and all of this. So the HVS, Jones Lang LaSalle, and you name it. These businesses are actually doing pretty well. HVS was reporting that their business was back to its 2019 level now. And so they're hiring. And so, some sectors are recovering and rebounding much faster than others. Take an unpaid internship, write your own story. But you need to stay positive, and you need to be aware, just open your mind and say yes more than you say no. That's, I think, will be my best advice. We have a few minutes left. Anything Vanja or Jonathan wants to add to the discussion? It's very exciting to have the hub. It's very exciting to have a space, as you said, Jonathan, that we'll be able to convene friends of the center, alumni, students, faculty, and staff in a single place. So we are very much looking forward to having some kind of in-person event, probably in the fall of 21.
I think just one comment. I graduated in 09, which was another time where we thought, that was a horrible job market. Obviously, it's very different now, but it's the same. I mean, it hasn't changed, right? Obviously, COVID is a new factor and variable, but being consistent in the coffee chats, meeting alumni, I think the network and relationship now more than ever is important, and it just goes to show that had folks have done the networking within NYU and the alumni, it's huge. And so to continue to do that, and it's not a completely different landscape, it's changed, so need to be adaptive, but to stay positive and use the alumni network, alumni like myself and other folks involved with the Tisch Center as best everyone can, because it's our job as well as alumni to be involved more than ever now, because that's when it's needed. So I'm sure the other fellow alums will do the same.
Thank you, Jonathan. We're getting to an end. There was a very good comment that said some student may not be able to take an unpaid internship. I fully understand that, and I certainly don't think there is a single answer to everyone. But I do think that for those who can take an unpaid, and if they can't find anything else, taking it is better than the alternative of not doing anything. I think that was the point we wanted to make, but I fully understand. And that is certainly why one of our main focus at the Tisch Center is to improve affordability. We announced last year a universal scholarship for all of our new grad students. They each get automatically $10,000 upon registering for courses. So we understand that very much, very much. Thank you again to all of you. Thank you for the audience. And if you want to be in touch, please stay connected with the school, with the Tisch Center. And thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Vanja, very much for your participation, especially in the middle of the night for you, Jonathan. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas.
Thank you, everybody.